We begin with a story from the oral tradition of the Potawatomi Nation, based on one told by Robin Wall Kimmerer in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. This story is not my story, and this tradition is not mine. May the respect I feel for the people and their story imbue this telling. This is how the world began. A hole opened up in the sky, and a woman fell through. She fell for a long time. As she fell, she could see nothing but the bundle she held in her hands. But from the dark water below, many eyes were looking up at her. The geese looked at one another, and as she fell, they could see that she was spiraling downward. First it was just a speck, but then it became the form of a woman, her arms outstretched, her hair billowing around her head. And the geese looked at one another, and they arose as one to catch her and break her fall. Well, they knew they would not have the strength to hold her for long, so they called a council. Beaver, loon, otter, sturgeon, fish, birds all came, and into the middle of the circle swam a big turtle. And the turtle said, "She can rest on my back." Gratefully, the woman stepped from the wings of the geese onto the domed back of the turtle. Now the animals knew that she would need land to make a home, but they had never seen land. They had heard that at the bottom of the ocean there was mud, and they resolved to get some. So the strong divers among them went first. First Loon dove, and he dove into the water, and he was gone a very long time. And when he came up, he was gasping for air, but he had no mud in his beak. All of the other animals who could dive tried next, but the depth was too great. Finally, all that was left was Muskrat, and he was the weakest diver of them all. But he wanted to try, so the other animals looked on doubtfully as Muskrat dove down, and he was gone long and long and long. Finally, they saw some bubbles arising to the surface, and after the bubbles, the limp body of Muskrat, who had given his life in the effort. But in his paw was a tiny bit of mud. They put it on the back of the turtle. Sky Woman bent down and spread the mud over the turtle's back. And she was so moved and so grateful for all that the animals had done that she began to sing and dance a song of gratitude, her feet caressing the earth that she had spread. And as she danced, the earth grew. So it was not by her song and her dance alone, but by the work together of all the creatures that this earth was born. Now, before she fell through the hole in Sky World, she had grabbed hold of a branch of the tree of life growing there, and it was the seeds from that branch that were in her bundle, and she spread them out on the earth. Many kinds of fruits and nuts and seeds and plants began to grow, turning the brown earth green. And the sun shone from the hole in Sky World. And soon, the animals saw that there would be food and medicine on this land. And so some of them came to join Sky Woman in living on Turtle Island, for that is what the people call home. Well, it was a story that drew me to preach about hope and climate change, which is perhaps the most challenging of any topic I have ever hazarded to try. The branching, leafy stories of people and trees in Richard Powers' novel, The Overstory. This got me thinking about hope in a new way. If human civilization on this planet is at risk of extinction as soon as 30 years from now, as recent reports indicate, then what is reasonable to hope for? But maybe that's the wrong question. Robin Wall Kimmerer begins her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, with the story of Sky Woman, asking how it may be that stories form our thinking. Her ancient people, the Potawatomi, grow in the knowledge that the earth was formed by a council of beings acting collaboratively in the service of hospitality and nourished by gratitude. Contrast that with the Judeo-Christian creation myth about the Garden of Eden, which has its own beauty, to be sure, but is a story that may point us less toward gratitude than to obedience, less toward hospitality than to fear of power, fear of being cast out. The Overstory convinced me, as no facts or figures ever could, that it was time for me to look squarely at the reality of climate change, proving a line that Richard Powers puts in the mouth of one of his characters. The best arguments in the world won't change a person's mind. The only thing that can do that is a good story. Your stories, the stories of good people struggling against despair, moving forward in the midst of fear and confusion, finding hope in community, the way Richard did at UCLA. Our stories inspire me when hope seems lost. Kimmerer suggests that to heal ourselves, to restore ourselves and the earth, we need a restoration. Well, one of the stories we good liberal thinkers often tell one another is the story of globalization, a shrinking world in which we are urged to think globally, act locally. But in that story, as we tell it, global thinking is pretty bound up in the capitalist system, isn't it? With its values skewed toward bigger, particularly bigger corporations, and more, particularly more wealth creation. And within that global juggernaut of capitalist wealth creation, saving the planet is a problem for tomorrow, if ever. Of course, we know, we who pay attention to science, that ever may not come. Now may be too late, and tomorrow surely is. So, what is there to hope for? What can we do? How we long for a single clear answer to that question. But the lack of that answer can keep us from action. It's the need for certainty, as one of Richard Powers' characters says, that blinds us to what's right here, at our feet, in our hands. Recycling, composting, planting trees wherever we can, weaning ourselves from single-use plastics and from fossil fuels. These are things to do, not so much for the individual impact our action will have, and God's how we long for that measurable impact, but as practices that bring us together, that nudge our minds and hearts toward care for our own small porch in the woods, care for the things we know, and making space in our minds and hearts for the things we don't know. The steps I take, walking back from the store to the car after I've forgotten again to bring in the reusable bags on the first trip. The steps I take in marching for climate awareness and against the human rights horrors that are calling us into action right now. These prepare me, if I use them to open my heart and mind. They prepare me to find what might be mine to do. And when I think that these small actions don't matter, so why should I bother? One antidote for that is to search out stories of people who are creating local economies in the true sense of the word, household economies, human ecosystems of reciprocity and interdependence. This church is such a local economy in the making, come to think of it. You come here for something, and in gratitude, give back something. Time, money, wisdom. In the process, you come to care for one another. Please don't dismiss that as insignificant in the scheme of the great and important turning that is needed, because it is precisely this turn toward the local that great thinkers like the venerable poet, farmer, ecologist Wendell Berry are urging. Localization depends on a revival of the neighborhood principle, Berry said in a conversation published last year in Orion magazine. People can only do this if they help each other. Indigenous people, those whose world was formed on the back of a turtle and others, have always known this, it seems. Wendell Berry said he receives mail every day from farmers who have scaled back, diversified, and increased the number of people who are employed on the land, neighbors helping neighbors. Care, not profit, the primary mover of their action. This is his incontrovertible answer to hopelessness. Barry believes in a trickle-up principle, that this kind of thinking, practiced with care and intention by individuals and communities, will make its way into the halls of what we in this country call power, government, and even corporations. We never know whose small effort will be the pebble to start a landslide, do we? As Rebecca Solnit points out in Hope in the Dark, nobody in 1989 Europe thought the Berlin Wall was coming down until it lay in rubble at their dancing feet. Here's another story. A 15-year-old in Sweden, a schoolgirl on the autism spectrum, hears about the gun safety activism of grieving high school students in Parkland, Florida. Inspired by them, she makes a powerful decision to apply her own prodigiously focused determination to raise the volume about the danger of climate catastrophe. Greta Thunberg is a compelling advocate for waking up right now before her future disappears. As I listen to Wendell Berry, as I think about Greta and all the Gretas I don't know about, I find myself drawn toward hopefulness. And I'm aware that can be a trap. I want my hope to be rigorous and critical, but that's a trap too, because many of us have been acculturated into a way of criticality that takes things apart to analyze them and leaves the pieces strewn about on the ground. No, I need hope that is both rigorous and still leaves room for mystery, for a wholeness that I cannot see and do not know. It is always in not knowing what might happen next that hope can be born, Rebecca Solnit reminds us. Now, this not knowing is the opposite of denial, and the exact opposite of the kind of willful refusal to know about the lives of others that allows people to create conditions of horror, as in the detention centers on our country's southern border. Here's something nobody knows. At least nobody knows in exactness the way we humans like to know things. Trees communicate with each other. They send each other warnings of pest invasions, for example. As living beings sharing a planet, they compete for sunlight, soil nutrients, and water resources, but they share them too and nurture one another in ways as yet undocumented by humans. In a forest, actually, it may make no sense at all, we are learning, to speak of individual trees, however much our human eyes are accustomed to seeing them one by one as resources to be harvested or appreciated. No, a forest is a system bound together in a mighty mutuality. There is science on all this, but even the scientists don't know exactly what is going on when trees send messages throughout the forest and beyond. A lot of it remains in the dark, in mystery. Of course, we know from our human experience that we too are individuals bound in systems of mutuality. Not one of us would be here if others of us weren't here, as the African concept of Ubuntu deftly expresses. How is it that we forget this so easily? How is it that as we grow into the individuals we are meant to be, we may forget that we are formed and supported in reciprocity with other humans and with all that sustains us? Sky Woman's people know this. For us, it is a forgetting that may cost us our very lives, and will surely cost us our lives as we are living them today. What will my grandsons' lives be like when they are my age? I need hope to be able to imagine a future for them that is good and whole and that I cannot even glimpse. As a white person in the US of A, as a white woman living in relative affluence, I know myself to be unpracticed in the rigorous hope I need to keep moving where I can and to keep my mind and heart opening to the possibilities of where I might move next. I find role models in communities of color in this nation and in countries whose governments are also practitioners of terror on their people. The resilience of people who have picked up their whole lives and their children and fled into uncertainty on the chance of a better life, the people coming to our border. That's the kind of rigorous hope I seek. We need practices to remind us, stories and role models to inspire us, and a healthy respect for uncertainty that allows us to keep moving when we don't know where we are going. It's easier for me to live in that uncertainty if I acknowledge something larger than myself at work in the world. And for that larger something, whether we call it God, mystery, collective consciousness, community wisdom, the interdependent web of relationships that sustain us, named or nameless, for all of this, gratitude is called for, is imperative. It helped build the earth on Turtle Island, after all. Gratitude will help us build the muscle of hope.